This is a short video review of the book called Tales of California, or another title it is known by is 20 Tales of California by Hector Lee. It is a rare collection of Western stories by Hector Lee, 150 pages, and it's pretty self-evident. There's 20 chapters or 20 stories. I'll give the introduction of the book right now. Here it is. These stories are drawn from folklore and from local history of California. Most of them are about real people. They are essentially true insofar as the historical facts can be verified, but some of them are folklore too, as the folk remember the truth or have fashioned it into local legend to retain the essential truth that may be closer to the spirit of a time, place, or person than the actual fact. They symbolize or represent old times in California and the Great Western Adventure. The late Dr. Hector Lee, the author of the book, was well known throughout the West as an entertaining storyteller and speaker on Western history and folklore. He was a distinguished educator and at one time the president of the California Folklore Society. This is the summary on the back of the book now. Masterfully written stories filled with drama, adventure, intrigue, and humor. Tales of real life, a mysterious painting, a devastating fire, bandits, sacred mountains, romance, and much more. From the folklore and local history of California, most of the stories are about real people. And it sounds like they say same thing that was on the previous one. And then as a family outing or a school field trip, you may want to visit places where some of these stories took place, read a story, then locate, visit, and explore its settings and visualize the story's characters in action. So, that was the front and back summary of the book. I will now give you a list of the actual stories inside the 20 stories without giving a description of each. And I'll start with number 1. The Last Train from Luffenholtz. Number 2, Father Florian's Secret. Number 3, The Russian and the Lady. Number 4, Hatfield the Rainmaker. Number 5, Diamonds in the Big Rock Candy Mountains. Number 6, Black Bart, the Shotgun Poet. Number 7, Once Upon a Winter Night. Number 8, The Dream and the Curse of Sam Brennan. Number 9, The Spirit of Joaquin. Number 10, The Siege of Sebastopol. I can't really say that right. Number 11, Lola Montez and Lotta Crabtree. Number 12, A Mountain That Was Named by Fate. Number 13, 15 Seconds to Kill. Number 14, William B. Ide, the Hero of Sonoma. Number 15, When Malay Pete Went Up. Number 16, Sontag and Evans. Number 17, You Can't Win 'Em All. Number 18, Lynching at Lookout Bridge. Number 19, High Spirits. And number 20, the last of the stories, Ishi the Man. So that is a list of the stories in the book. And now, this is the book here. I actually ordered online from abooks.com. Got it pretty fast, and I've ordered other books such as The War with Mexico Reviewed by Abiel Livermore. And suggest if you're looking for a book, that would be a place to start. Now I shall get into the purpose of the video that I made this video for. So far online I haven't been able to find any videos or reviews of this specific book by Hector Lee, so I figured I might as well be the first to order it and do a review on it. So this is what the video is, and it is also in continuation of the other book review, The War with Mexico Reviewed by Abiel Livermore. And I shall read my purpose of the video. The author of The War with Mexico Reviewed, Minister Abiel Livermore, a well-educated and religious American reformist, wants readers and Americans to look at these stories in California and their historical Western novels, the stories, in perspective of the crime and unjustness of the war with Mexico, its effects on our principles and people, and how they contrast to the true Christian state and free nation which we were designed to be. And I will refer to the quote that I am talking about specifically here from that book in reference to the tales of California life, early California life. It is unnecessary to go into California with like testimonies. It is assumed that nothing but outrages and barbarities could be expected in such a distant region from the national government, to where laws could be broken with impunity and justice evaded. Many acts of the war were contrary to the laws of nations and the Constitution and our treaty with Mexico. A system of tariffs and taxes in the new territory on the inhabitants, pledging hostility to those who rose to shake off their control, the occupation of a foreign territory without the consent of the governed, were no acts that could be recognized by the laws of nations, however it might be sanctified by the bloody coat of Mars, that Roman war code. The invasion of California by Jones and Stockton without approval of Congress and before a treaty could be made were contrary to the Constitution and to the treaty with Mexico. There are provisions to repel invasions but not to make them. Eminent statesmen had worded their opinions stating the president had brought himself to the perils of an impeachment by such an act. The conquest of California, Mexican territory, with the connivance, if not the aid of the national government, was contrary to the laws of nations and the Constitution. The territory we see here, California, was as much robbed and stolen from its owners, Mexico, as his booty is extorted from a traveler by threat of arms. We beat, we threatened, we coaxed Mexico to do what was against its interests and desires. Can such treasures, then gained, carry a blessing to their possessors? The ancient saying may now be fulfilled. He granted them their request, but he put leanness onto their souls. Who that reviews the violent and fraudulent means employed to revolutionize and conquer California? Who that reads the history of the nations who have abounded in the precious metals? Who that reads the tales of California life thus far developed could look with honest complacency on the gold coin stamped with that appellation? I actually have a gold coin of the California for our viewers. There was as many contradictions and violations of the laws of man and nations in this conflict as were there violations of the law of God. Had both sides been truly convicted on the means of peace, not a single shot would have been fired, nor Texas had been annexed, but other counsels prevailed. Nor would have cities with names such as Beautiful Sight, Good View, or the Sacrament ever raised from their innocent obscurity to become horrible names of battles and battlefields between two Christian nations. And if the period ever arrives to where the largest republic on earth, Mexico, and the most hopeful and consistent one besides our own, is blotted out of the record of nations and becomes the Poland of the West, we, the United States, shall stand condemned in the eyes of heaven and our own for being the authors of such tremendous a catastrophe. It is no honor that we, the stronger nation, one able to forbear, must attack and take from the weaker. It is no honor that we must grasp and cover an entire continent when we could have found ample work in what we already had. The scars of the battlefield may heal over, but the lust and desire for wealth may inflict deeper wounds on a nation. If this be our destiny to conquer and divide other nations, sooner are our days numbered as a nation, for the better for the peace of the world. And to let our fellow countrymen beware before they stumble upon the thick bosses of those bucklers of the Almighty God, who have already drank up the blood of the world's proudest victors and conquerors. And that was a quote from the book The War with Mexico Reviewed by Abiel Livermore, the American Peace Society. And I figured that was important because in that book and in that quote he talks about who, after reviewing the violent, unconstitutional, and illegal conquest of California, who that reads tales such as these can treat it with any sort of seriousness or anything like that. Here's the coin. It said, who that reviews the violent and fraudulent means employed to revolutionize California, who that reads the tales of California life thus far developed, can look at the gold coin stamped with that appellation. So I figured that was pretty interesting and related to these early historical accounts and stories in California. So I shall now go on to stories from the book, and I'll only give the important or significant stories for the viewers. The ones I shall first refer to are going to be the less honorable stories, and the ones that are related to that quote before of the illegal conquest of California. So when you look at these stories, it's kind of an extension of a whole bunch of unjust acts committed by the government. So here is number one. This is Black Bart, the Shotgun Poet. And the description of that story is, there is a legend about this California bandit who never hurt anybody, but didn't make much money at his trade. And I read this one. I don't know if in this book they have pictures for some of the stories, but some of them don't have pictures. But Black Bart was a bandit, a thief, a criminal, and he never really killed anyone or never really did much huge crime, but he was more of a philanthropic criminal. And there was a quote, he would leave papers at all of his crimes to let them know it was him, with like some philanthropic quote about something. And his main thing was, if I'm going to be remembered or go to jail, let it be for my poem. It was something like that. Let it be known for my poetry. So super random, super outlandish banditry in early California. So that was story number one. Let's go to number two now. This one's pretty interesting and kind of what you would expect from the Golden State, this new mining state that was added. This is Diamonds in the Big Rock Candy Mountains. This is the description. California's most brilliant hoax was pulled on the West's most clever financiers by two simple old prospectors. And so what it was is two prospectors that owned the land decided to pull a quick one and see if they could inflate the land, the value of the land, their mine, by placing gemstones and gold inside a mine area to trick the surveyors. And it almost worked until a real mining group came and said, you don't find rubies with gold. You don't find diamonds with this. And you don't find gold and diamonds in trees. So this is obviously a hoax. So pretty interesting. That was a kind of what I would expect out of early California. Let's see. This is number 3. The spirit of Joaquin. And this is the description. The folk still talk about Joaquin Murrieta, California's dashing Robin Hood, who was mostly fiction spiced with imagination. Joaquin was a Mexican California native, and he was just a normal citizen, a normal miner in Gold County. And at the time, there was a lot of racial hostility and anti-foreign policy in mining, and that resulted in an attack on his wife and his brother, which turned him pretty much into a life of banditry. But it was aimed at usually the American settlers, and usually criminal American settlers. So it's another story of vigilantism and banditry in California. Number 4 is the William B. Ide, the hero of Sonoma. And here's the description. He was president of the Bear Flag Republic, the commander-in-chief of its little army, and the most versatile official of old Colusa County. Yet he died in poverty, mysteriously and in secret. So this story is just describing how this group came into California without authorization, without any authority, and decided to invade the capital of California, the Mexican capital. And they eventually succeeded and turned it into the state of California. But if you read my other book review, The War with Mexico, that act by Kearney and without act of Congress was a high-handed outrage and violation of the Constitution and the laws of the nation. So the whole conquest, that whole Bear Flag Republic there's no legality to that. It was an unconstitutional war without any authority. And if you want to read more on that, you could go to my other videos. And this is number 5, lynching at Lookout Bridge. And Lookout Bridge is near Bieber and Alturas, or I'm trying to remember. I know it was the town of Bieber. But this is the description. Folk retribution, justice, and an unexpected touch of irony make the difference in this true story of violence in the Old West. And this story was pretty much a bunch of criminals got caught, committing some crimes, and they got put in jail. But the people of the town weren't happy with the progress of the justice system. They believed they should be put to death or whatever, and they weren't. So the sheriff kind of turned a blind eye and left the jail open, and vigilantes came, grabbed the men, took them to the bridge, and did the old-fashioned Western-style California justice system and hung them. And this was kind of common in the West and common at the time, because lynching was a pretty common practice, not only on African Americans, but it was just as frequent in the West and in California with Mexicans and natives. So that's that story. And this is the last of the lesser honorable stories that I have for review. This one is You Can't Win 'Em All. And another, it's a good angel, bad angel. And the description of this is here. A good angel and a bad angel gambled, and the stakes were Dr. John Marsh. He is a huge figure in the gold rush. And the squire from east of Mount Diablo. So this story is pretty interesting, and it's kind of a good angel and a bad angel making a bet over if human greed is greater than human compassion, if humans are good or not. And they took a guy from California, a very prominent, very rich man, and they're kind of just saying, let's take a bet. I'll do good things for him, see if he appreciates it, then we'll do bad things. And you'd have to read the story. It's pretty interesting. But at the end, the bad angel wins, and Dr. Marsh dies of poverty and is actually killed by his hired mining laborers on his lands, on his claim. So kind of a tragic end of a story there. And to turn the page and uplift the spirits a little bit, these are more honorable stories, so kind of funny or interesting historical stories in the book. Whoops, this fell over. And here is number 1, Last Train from Luffenholtz. Here's the description. Their town burned by a forest fire, and 60 desperate people waited for the last train that would carry them to safety or to a certain death. Luffenholtz was a town in Humboldt, I believe, and it was a very small logging community, I think, logging or mining, and a fire broke out and completely engulfed the whole town. And if it wasn't for the train that was docked at the train station and for the compassion that was in the driver of the train, they all would have died. But thankfully, the train took them all out of Luffenholtz to another town away from the fire, and Luffenholtz is actually no longer a town. It's completely gone. I don't even think they tried to rebuild it. Maybe our viewers could comment more on that, but there is a Luffenholtz beach. That's all I could find. But as far as the town, it is gone. So that is that story. Here is number 2, When Melee Pete Went Up. A heroic little man with grand ideas became what might have been California's first balloon casualty. And this one was pretty funny. A balloon scientist, I believe, or someone who was working with balloons, set flight, and he was on a chair, and it started working, but he didn't realize he couldn't stop it. So he starts floating off into the Sierra Nevadas, and an account of some other citizens later on said they saw him floating, and then he just burst into flames and disappeared. And so they assumed he passed away or whatever. But it turns out the dude a few days later comes walking into town, and he said, I'm alive. Not only am I alive, when I fell into a river, and then a whole bunch of gold miners came and got me, found me, and then I started gold mining. So that's pretty funny. The dude falls a few hundred feet out of the sky into the river, and then gets up, starts panning for gold. That's pretty wild. So here's number 3. This one's Father Florian's Secret. Sawyer's Bar was a rough and tumble mining camp in the 1850s until the little padre of Paradise Flat came with his secret bundle. This one has a good moral theme to it. This town was supposedly like it said, rough and tumble mining camp, no authority, no laws, whole bunch of crime, bad characters, and the local town mayors or the local leaders of the town got together and they said, we need some law and order, we need some good influence, we need a church, we need a priest. So they inquired for a priest, and he came all the way from like Europe, I believe. Came to the town and had this big old bundle on his back. And for the longest time, they couldn't figure out what it was until he finally created the church. And on the first day of the sermon, he unfolds the satchel on his back, and it's a big old professional, very high grade painting of the crucifixion, and which would become the centerpiece of the church. And that painting and that story kind of inspired the town so much that it became less of a rough and tumble, less crime, and became more pacific, more prosperous. This is the next one. Hatfield the Rainmaker. This one's pretty funny. The people of San Diego can laugh at it now, but they are pretty careful how they pray for rain. So what happened in this story is PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, the power company, there was a whole bunch of fire risks from their new lines, transmission lines, and there wasn't any rain. So they decided to reduce the fire risk. They decided to get a scientist to find a way to increase the rain or reduce the fire risk, and he decided he could try and make it rain. So he creates this, what we would now be considered cloud seeding, where you burn aluminum oxide or whatever into the air and it produces clouds. Anyways, he did this, it worked, and then he tried it on a larger scale in San Diego and flooded a whole bunch of towns. And the moral of the story is PG&E found out how to make it rain, and San Diego got their rain. So kind of a funny story there. Never heard of those stories, so I'm kind of glad I got this book and doing the review, because some of these are hilarious. And that was it on the review. I don't want to give too many more stories, because I'm going to leave the rest for our viewers and for people who order the book. I believe it was $10, pretty cheap. I couldn't find it for free online anywhere or any PDFs, so unless you watch this video or order the book, you're going to have to... That's the only way you're going to find the book, be able to read it. And I will close the video with a good quote and opinion for our viewers. It is generally aimed at the American audience. Albert Gallatin, and this is a eminent statesman in the United States at the time of the Mexican War of 1846, declared this as our true destiny in the United States. The true destiny of this country was this: your mission was to be a model for all governments and for all other less favored nations, to adhere to the most elevated principles of political morality, to apply all of your faculties to the gradual improvement of your own institutions and social state, and by your own example to exert a moral influence most beneficial to mankind at large. Instead of this, an appeal has been made to your worst passions, to cupidity, to the thirst of unjust aggrandizement, by brutal force, to the love of military fame and false glory, and it has even been tried to prevent the noblest feelings of your nature. The attempt is made to make you abandon the lofty position which your fathers occupied, to substitute for it the political morality and heathen patriotism of the heroes and statesmen of antiquity. And that quote was from The War with Mexico Reviewed by Abiel Livermore. And that is basically saying our peace, our destiny is in a Christian state, in being a role model, in setting the highest standard of government, and by doing that, lending our influence what's best for civilization, other nations, and other peoples. It's not in wars or conquests. It's not in the speculation of precious metals like gold. And it's not in attacking the weaker or attacking our neighbors. And like Madison said, peace is preeminently our policy. So if we could do anything good for our nation, it could be, how could we avoid wars and avoid having tales such as these as record of our foolishness, according to the author Abiel Livermore. So that is it. Here's the book. I'll flip through some of the pages for you. I think this is the picture of the Russian and the lady story, which is, I believe, that's a Mexican Californian native, and she falls in love with a Russian sailor who is pretty much, the Russian presence is kicked out of California, and he dies and never comes back, so she's kind of a widow now. Sad story. Let's see if I can give you some good. That is the Fire of Luffenholtz. That's the train with the passengers leaving. Some good art in this book, so that's pretty interesting to look at too. Father Florian with his satchel, his painting. Yep, the Russian and the lady. That is it. Diamond and Big Rock Mountain. Joaquin. And if you're lost on my other quotes on the war with Mexico, you would have to, I would refer our viewers to go watch that video, and you'd have a better understanding of kind of what I'm talking about when I'm giving those quotes. This is Lola Montez and Lotta Crabtree. A bear flag. William B. Ide, hero of Sonoma. Let's see if I can get closer. That's the bear flag right there. There's the first balloon accident in California when Melee Pete went up. Just a dude on a chair floating away. Sounds about right, you know. There's the good angel, bad angel. I would suggest readers to read that one. That's pretty interesting. This one's pretty ominous. I know when I saw it, I'm like, whoa, this one's going to be crazy. So this is the lynching at Lookout Bridge. If you could see in the water, there's a reflection of the people that were hanged. So that's pretty gnarly. It's not the greatest example of our justice system. And what's cool at the end of this book is the author actually added like an activity for students or families or historians that they could actually go check out the locations where these places are on like a school trip or whatever. And they actually have activities like questions. I'll take an example. This is Diamonds in the Big Rock Candy Mountains. What personal characteristics helped make Mr. Arnold and Mr. Slack successful swindlers? So it's just questions that you could have the students read and then have activity on it afterwards. So that's pretty cool. I like how the author added that. So yeah, I figured I would be the first to review this book since I could not find it anywhere. And since it goes in part with my other book reviews on the Mexican-American War. So, I'll give a California coin right there. I have another video on this if you want to watch that too. It has United States Eagle on the back. Well, I would like to thank the viewers for watching, and if they would like to order this book, they could go to A-Books, or I believe Walmart also had it, but you would have to double check on that. So I forgot to add in the previous video that I had some additional stories of California, not in the book, The Tales of California, but just some that I added that I think the viewers would be interested in. I have a video on this one already. This is The Squatter and the Don. This is describing early California life on the Mexican side and how some American settlers from New England came and pretty much took up their land and pretty much forced them off the land. So that's a good story. If you want to check it out, you could read that. This is The War with Mexico Reviewed. This is a 200-year-old book, original publication by Abiel Livermore. It's pretty worn, obviously, by the age. But this describes pretty much the illegality and unconstitutional act of the war with Mexico, and pretty much this is the best book to read when it comes to that event. And this is by an American author, a Christian minister, so he is taking a neutral stance. So based on his opinions, it was an unjust act, and pretty much describes by fact how the Constitution was broken by the conquest of California. So that's a good one. You could read this one. Let's see if I can give you a page. Very old. Let's see. Original. I try not to touch this as much as I can. There it is. Let's see, maybe I could get to a chapter because I have a specific chapter picked out. Illegalities, chapter 16, I believe, or 14. Numerous unlawful acts preceded the war. The conquest of Mexican territory by citizens of the United States with the connivance, if not the aid, of the national and state government was contrary to the laws of the nation. The seizure of Monterey in California, October 19th, 1842, by Commodore Jones was a lawless act disavowed indeed by the government, but the perpetrator was never punished. So that's just an example of what's in the book. If you want to check it out, you could read it. I have another story about John Sutter. He was a pretty large figure in the discovery of gold in California, and he actually, there's a recent story, he's actually an immigrant with a false name. His real name is like John Suter or something like that, and he actually was a fugitive, had a whole bunch of debts, and they ended up reclaiming the land because of his debts. So that's another interesting story. As far as the stories and books, that is the end of what I have, but there's another movie I have. It's not necessarily in California, but it is about the new territories gained from the war with Mexico, and it's during the time period of the Civil War. So pretty interesting movie. It's called Kelly Alvarez, and it's about a Mexican rancher that gets a contract with the Union Army to deliver some cattle and beef to the Union side, and he gets captured and a trick played on him by Confederates, which take the cattle and take him hostage. And pretty awesome movie. If you want to check it out, I'd watch it. You could find it for free on YouTube, I believe, or anywhere else online. Well, that's all I have. Thank you for watching.